right, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Farida Nabourema, and I will be moderating this great panel session. Today, I am moderating a session on a critical question for civil society workers in Africa. The question is, how can CSOs or can foreign African CSOs survive without foreign donors? So, as panelists today, I have Mrs. Degan Ali. She's the Executive Director of ADESO, and she has more than 20 years of hands-on experience, in the humanitarian and development field. Degan is a strong believer in transforming the current aid system to give more power and voice to local communities um, and, and develop new solutions to build the infrastructure that will truly shift power and resources, including co-founding the Network for Empowered Aid Response, NEAR. My second panelist today is a good brother of mine, Jimm, who comes from Cameroon. Jimm is a member and works at WASCI since May 2018. He's the head of the Knowledge Management and Communication Unit of the Institute. He has over 10 years of experience as a journalist and a development communication expert. He has a vast experience in supporting African organizations to strengthen their internal and external communication, building and sustaining relationship with the media, and leveraging on the power of social media to promote their mission. He's also excellent, at supporting organizations to set up and operationalize functional communication and knowledge management system. Jimm has a deep passion and expertise in supporting Africans and African civil society organizations to document their praxis, share and learn from experiences documented from the African civil society. Dear Jimm and dear Degan, you're both welcome today. Jimm, would you mind turning on your camera, please? So our participants can put a face to the name. Okay, thank you very much. Before we start the conversation, I would please like you to tell me a little bit about yourself in addition to what I have said, anything that can complement the biography that I have read to our participant. So Mrs. Degan, to you, can you please tell us about what you do as a society worker in Africa?
Bismillah. Thank you, Farida. As the bio said, I'm the executive director of an NGO, local NGO that works both in Kenya and Somalia. And I'm also a global advocate on trying to change the humanitarian development architecture that's currently very northern driven, white supremacist in the way it operates in our countries, and trying to basically reclaim the rightful power we have as members of the community and as civil society representing those community members. So a lot of the work that I've been working on is around what the humanitarian system likes to call localization, which is a very top-down pejorative term for basically doing this work on equity and justice. So I've led that movement, and it's not a terminology we chose. Again, it's another reflection of the top-down racism in the system, where they choose language for us to describe us, about us, and our desires and our wants. So I've led that movement, and I'm trying to basically, as a global advocate on these issues, is trying to basically figure out how we as civil society not only can make different demands, but also model different behavior ourselves by just being an agents of change ourselves, and not just mimicking and copying the INGO model and what the global north says is what we should be like and what we should be doing. And that's a lot of questioning that we have to do internally, which is why I'm excited about this topic of today.
Thank you very much, Degan. And now to you, Jim. Can you please tell us about yourself and the work you do at WASCI and at large in civil society in Africa?
Thank you very much, Farida, and all colleagues on the panel. In addition to what Farida shared, at the West Africa Civil Society Institute, I equally facilitate on a program called the Change the Game Academy. I would just like to emphasize or highlight that because that is closely connected to the discussion of today. And the Change the Game Academy is basically a program that seeks to enable African civil society or participants in the program to, one, understand the rich potential we have in our communities, to understand that there is a possibility in generating the resources we need from the immediate environments in which we operate. So one, how to identify these resources. Two, gaining the tactics and the skills, to be able to tap into these resources. And then three, utilizing these resources in a way that will motivate potential providers of these resources to continue to support such a cause. And there are two principal programs under the Change the Game Academy program. One is the mobilizing support, which basically enables us to understand how to galvanize the support from our key constituents. And then the second is local fundraising, and local fundraising, as I said, is directly related to the topic under discussion. And that's really one reason why I am particularly keen and interested in participating in this program, particularly from my organization, the West Africa Civil Society Institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim, for this that you just shared with us. My first question now will go to Degan. Degan, in your intervention, you mentioned that you are trying to change the discourse about civil society in Africa that is extremely white supremacist and racist to some extent. Can you please tell us what you mean by a racist discourse when it comes to civil society in Africa? And can you tell us how do you think the change can be made, and how do we define an African civil society that is enshrined in African culture or African literature?
Yeah. Well, it manifests itself in many ways. It manifests itself in the language, this idea that they're expatriates and we're field staff, local versus international. It manifests itself in resources, who gets the lion's share of the funding. So if you are USAID or DFID or CEDA, let's look at your charitable giving or your funding to in the charitable sector, and you will find that probably 50% of the funding goes to the UN, Global North led. Majority of the power still is in the hands of the European and North American members of the UN. And we can talk about some of the geopoliticals of how the aid system is racist. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, so majority of that money goes to the UN. And then the second largest recipients after the UN is the INGOs. And according to the data, in 2014, when the World Humanitarian Summit was starting, only 0.2% of the entire humanitarian pot of money, which can vary anywhere between $26 to $28 billion a year, was going directly to civil society in the global South. So that means that in all the largest humanitarian crises, whether South Sudan, Congo, Somalia, Liberia during the Ebola crisis, all of these countries, that only 0.2 of every dollar given by a donor was going straight from the donor into the hands of civil society. Everything else had layers and layers and layers and layers of intermediaries. Yeah, They would give it to a UNICEF. UNICEF would give it to a Save the Children. Save the Children would give it to another Save the Children, and Save the Children would give it to the national office. And then maybe they'd give it to a local NGO. So how much of that do you actually think goes to the communities on the ground? Very little. So that's one way that it manifests itself. This who holds the money, because who has the money is the kingmaker and makes the decisions. How are we represented in decisions at the national level? Forget about the global level in Geneva, New York, but how are we actually having power in making decisions in our own countries? I remember in 2003, when I first started in Somalia, I literally had to fight to be allowed to be participating in a coordination meeting about my own country, about my own people, and I wasn't invited, and it was a bunch of white people making decisions about white people. This happens every single day. And it happens in English language. It happens in Nairobi, outside of Somalia. So most Somalis don't have access. You know, you have to be privileged to have visas, to have a certain type of passport, to be able to travel to Kenya. You have to speak their language. You have to have someone allow you to be put on a list to come into that UN compound where the meeting is being held. It's only by invitation only. So, I mean, it's so exclusionary in so many ways. That's another way it manifests itself. Another last way, I'll just talk briefly, is about the complicity of the aid system in the geopolitics. When I say geopolitics, I'm talking about aid is very, very political. It's soft power in the hands of the northern donors. They're not doing this because they're good people. They're doing this as part of their political agenda in these countries. They're doing this because they want something from our countries. They're still extracting resources. There are 14 countries in West Africa who were former colonies of France. Those 14 countries, as of today, don't have sovereign financial and trade policies. If you're one of the 14 countries and you're the minister of infrastructure or finance and you want to build a road, there is an agreement in writing as part of gaining independence that you have to give the first right of refusal to a French company. Where's the sovereignty in that? Yeah. So, and then on top of that, I was reading an article a month or two ago about how European companies are actually bringing in milk, and I say in quotes on purpose because it's not classified as milk in the European system. It would actually, it's not allowed, it's not legal for them to sell the same milk products in the European markets because it's not genuine milk. It's so unhealthy. Now they're able to sell it in Burkina Faso, these European companies, and this milk is actually eroding the local milk producers out of the market because it's so cheap. So it's like dumping. Do you remember years ago when Nestle was dumping milk, terrible milk into Africa, so that breastfeeding mothers didn't give their children breast milk, but they gave them this Nestle just product that was full of chemicals that was terrible for children? Well, it's the same thing that's happening now today in 2020. And so they're removing the local milk producers out of the market, number one. Number two, this is obviously going to have health impact on children in Burkina Faso. Now, the same EU, instead of confronting their government, their multinational companies in doing this, will fund UNICEF or will fund Save the Children to do a food security program and help these same children in malnutrition and food insecurity. I mean, look at that. So on the one hand, you allow your companies to do these horrific things in our countries. On the other hand, you whitewash that by giving money to northern institutions who now are basically complicit in aiding and abetting your terrible practices. You see, so this is what I'm talking about. This is why aid is extremely, extremely political. And we need to wake up and realize that this is actually a conversation about reparations. It shouldn't be a conversation where we are seen as asking for favors, as asking for them to do better with us or by us. No, we should be demanding reparations for the years and years and hundreds of years of extraction that they have done under colonialism and they continue to do under independence.
Degan, thank you very much for this. What kind of like a lot of things you said actually hits very, very close to home. I am Togolese and I do have a total understanding of the Pacte colonial, we call it in French, that was established by French, which is basically hindering our countries in many ways from their autonomy and their sovereignty, and has implemented or installed a sort of dependency, continuous dependency with France, because basically every political decision that we make is influenced to some extent by the French colonizers. And the system of France-Afrique is so deeply routed that beyond the economic and the monetary colonization that we are enduring, it also enters other layers because the system is extremely pervasive and goes as far as affecting the type of education we receive, the type of literature we are exposed to, and it gives us the impression that we are living in a cage where no matter how hard we try, there is no issue and there's no way for us to get out of that space. But before I get back to you, because I have some questions in regards to what you've said, let me hear a little bit about from Jimm. Jimm, can you please tell us a little bit about the history of donor funding humanitarian work in Africa? Can you tell us about how it started from your perspective?
Can I tell you from how it? I didn't get the last part of the question, please.
The background of foreign donors, mostly European donors, funding CSOs in Africa. Can you provide us some background on this?
Well, thank you very much for that insightful question. Again, I think I'll just go on the lines of Degan as to the fact that yes, the European donors, they craft the ideas, the funding mechanisms from their countries or their continents, because it's Europe, it's America, and now when they are coming to spend, they dictate to us, how, where to spend it, when to spend it, why to spend it, how to report it back to them. But what is really critical about it, which is something we really need to interrogate as African people, is who is contributing to implement these projects, or who is spending most of that money that has been decided by them. And that is where you see the sending experts, their own nationals, who take the chunk of the money. And then those of us who are the contextual experts are rather considered as foot soldiers. Foot soldiers is basically local parlance in Ghana that tells you are not just a boy on the field. And so when they craft it as such, we in Africa, despite the high level of expertise, the high level of understanding of the terrain, and the know-how on possibly how to get the solutions of the problems we want, we are underdogs in the process that is leading to our development. So it is really a predominantly biased mechanism that is being designed by a group of people, to help resurrect us Africans. And that is why it's really critical for us Africans. Yes, we have the expertise, we have the know-how. How can we start pulling together the resources we have so that it can complement whatever is coming from the West? And if we can go by the trade, win-win, then we can have a bigger bargaining power, a stronger bargaining power that will really enable us to stand a good footing, to bargain for what we want and possibly get more of what we want on the development agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimm. I really appreciate the insight that you brought. And this will take me back to Degan. Degan, you did mention, you gave me a figure that I find very interesting, which stated that barely 0.2% of the humanitarian aid that is allotted to the global South goes directly to civil society organizations on the ground, because there are many layers. And at the end of the day, you have those middle institutions such as the United States, the United Nations, and then the regional blocks maybe at the institutional level, and the international NGOs, which basically absorb the majority of the funding, and the crumbles that are left are the ones that goes to the CSOs. But my question is, you did also mention the fact that the aid is not really aid; it's actually a placebo that the donor countries develop to kind of like give themselves the impression, or give the world the impression, that they care about issues that at the end of the day their own organizations or their colonialism are responsible for. So my question to you is, how can us Africans, especially Africans who work in civil society, who are passionate about development issues, human rights issues, how can we actually counter that? Do we push for a narrative of them not providing the aid because we believe it's insignificant, or do we actually resist them on another front by actually forcing them to take action in response to the poor business practices of their multinational corporation and the poor foreign policies of their government?
I think we have to tackle it from all sides. We have to hold these same white Northern donors accountable. We have to speak truth to their power. We have also a lot of power in our hands that we don't realize and appreciate. And that means we have the power to refuse, to say, we don't want you in our countries. We don't want you in our communities. Or, I mean, imagine if all civil societies in organizations in Liberia said, enough is enough. Unless you do X, Y, and Z, we're not taking your money, we're not working with you. They couldn't operate there without them. They couldn't operate. That's huge amounts of power that they have, the power to strike and say enough is enough. But we don't, we're so disunited. We're so motivated by money. We are so motivated by our own self-interest. Many of us become complicit and get bought into the system, and we get compromised. And money is a powerful, powerful motivator. You know, you go from earning $1,000, $2,000 with a CSO, and then all of a sudden you're earning $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 with an ING or UN agency. And that's part of getting bought into the system. You know, it's not only part of moving up the ladder. Why is the ladder the pinnacle of the ladder the UN? Why isn't the pinnacle of the ladder being an executive director of a very strong civil society organization in your country? Why isn't the pinnacle of the ladder being a minister in your own country to change the behavior of these aid organizations in your country? Why is the pinnacle being a D1 in the UN? You see, this is the problem. We have to change our minds and reprogram ourselves, because we ourselves are colonized. And I was one of those people. When I came into the sector, I thought, like everybody else, that bigger was better. So all I was trying to do is make ADESO be a carbon copy of an INGO and go after money and money and money and money, growth. And the more offices I have, the bigger staff I have. That was my metrics of success, you see. And I bought into that lock, stock, and barrel. And it took me a long time to decolonize my mind and realize, and the more I got, the more I realized that I was never going to be accepted. Yeah, I was never going to be the same. I was never be equal and up to par. I was always to the point where I became enemy number one to these same INGOs because they saw me as a threat. If you're a small local organization that has an annual income of $1 million, they're not going to see you as a threat. But if you are growing in size and competing for the same projects and the same funding as them, and you're being viewed as equal to them, then you are a big threat. And they will do everything possible to silence you. And then I realized, you know, like, I cannot be me. I cannot be genuine and speak out, and at the same time keep taking this money. I had to come to a decision. I have to say, which one is more important, my values and my principles or the money? And I chose my values, but it's not easy. Many people choose the money, and this is where we are complicit. And I have the privilege to be able to do that. Not everybody has that privilege. I know that's a privilege that I have, but at the same time, we do have to make some really, really hard choices as Africans in how we handle this and reflect on our own behavior and our own complicity. Almost every single person I have known from the continent who I have admired and have found extremely like progressive and radical and questioning and all of that, they've almost all been co-opted by the system, almost all of them. So you're kind of left wondering who's left in the streets, who's there to fight these battles, who's the one who's mobilizing people and marching on the streets against these kinds of behaviors. So that's one. Secondly, I feel like we have a responsibility as Africans to really work on our own national civil society. And that's what I chose to do. I said, what is my sphere of influence? Where can I change behavior? So I started trying to work with the Somali civil society and trying to get them to understand and unlock their minds and start thinking of the possibilities. We had COVID in March, April. Everybody was just waiting for money to fly in from the Northerners. And what did the Northerners do? They all flew to their home countries. They all left us and abandoned us. And who was left holding the bag? It was the local civil society and the local communities. And where you had a strong government, it was the government civil servants. And we didn't have a strong government in Somalia, so everybody left. And so one of the things I challenged my colleagues, the other NGOs that I'm a part of in this platform, is I said, we are now in June, July, COVID has come, the doom and gloom scenarios that was predicted for Africa hasn't happened. I'm not seeing these massive death rates in Somalia. I'm not hearing of it. Let's do a study. Let's do a national study. And they're like, no, we don't have money for that. I was like, no, spend our own money. Let's pool our resources together and let's do it ourselves. Oh, well, we don't have a qualified researchers. We'll get one. We'll hire them. We'll pay them, and we'll use our own money. Anyways, we ended up doing the only national COVID research study. The UN hasn't done it. An INGO hasn't done it. The government hasn't done it. We actually brought the government in, and it was all 100% self-funded. And it was a national survey all across Somalia. And for me, it was shocking that they just couldn't get through the idea of fundraising. It was like everything was stopped at the fundraising. We need money from outside to come in and do this research. And I was like, no, we have resources ourselves. We ended up doing a research study with amazing, massive sample size with less than $10,000. I think it was like $7,000 or $8,000 in the end, using our own staff on the ground, using our own vehicles, using our everything. And for less than that same research study, I have done similar donor-funded research studies with smaller sample size, would have cost probably close to $50,000, $80,000. You see, so we can find all types of ways of increasing the budget because we know that the donor is out there. But let's just be honest with ourselves. If we really are doing this for our own people, many things don't have to cost so much that we put in these budgets. Let's just be honest with ourselves. But we got into this behavior because this is what we're modeling what the INGOs do and the UN do. It's all about growth and big, and let's just spend every cent we have. It's another term that I learned in the system that was shocked me. Burn. Let's burn the money. What's the burn rate? I was like, what? You're burning money? Yeah, because the donor wants you to spend by a certain time period and they don't want you to return the money. So everybody is monitoring their burn rate. And what does that mean? That means you are in this irresponsible position of having to get potentially millions of dollars out the door in a short span of time. When you are a $100 million organization, whether UN or an INGO, 100 million per year, and you have to burn 100 million per year. Do you tell me that you're doing it responsibly? That you're doing it without creating systems of corruption? There's no way in hell you can convince me that that's being done in a responsible way, that that's being done in a way that's impactful on the ground, that that's being done without actually creating corruption that later we're blamed for. Then that's another thing that comes out, the narrative. We're the ones who are risky, we're fraudulent, we're corrupt. But who contributes to that system? Who is the biggest peddler in corruption? It's the guys who have all the money. It's the UN and the INGOs, because they've created this environment where people are throwing money irresponsibly, burning money. As I literally said, they're literally burning this money away. You know, what did the Somalis say? Oh, it's free money. They're throwing it away like nothing. This is a big party. Let's get some of it. Who's creating that environment for corruption? It's them who's creating it. And our people have become just smart enough to realize there's an opportunity for them. I don't blame them. I don't blame them when the UN and the international sector is one of the biggest employers in a country like Somalia. I don't blame people for doing that. But who is the purveyor of this? Who's the leader of this? Who's modeling this behavior? It's them, not us. Sorry, let me stop.
Thank you very much. No, thank you very much. I could listen to you all day, and I can relate so much to so many of the things that you said, from activists and civil society leaders being co-opted in the system to the point where they are silenced. It's an involuntary, it's kind of like an indirect silencing where they don't tell you to be silent, but because you're part of the system, you are less likely to criticize the failures of the system. You're less likely to denounce the abuse in the system and the corruption and the rotten in the system. And in addition to that, how the experience on burning money, there is no time of the year that is more pressing and scarier than the end of the year, the end of the fiscal year in most countries, because that's where you have all NGOs organizing hundreds of activities. And sometimes you are confused because I remember the first time that I started working in an NGO, that was in 2018. From October to December that year was the busiest 3 months of my life, because every week there were so many activities as they wanted to spend the money before the end of the year. Why? Because, well, if you don't spend it, you have to return it. And the funny thing is, the international donors are the only donors who are not happy about getting their money back. So you will return it to the donor, but the donor will not like receiving the money back. So that's going to frustrate them, and they may not give to you in the future. So the pressure is not even from the fact that you need to do something with the money, but the fear that if you don't waste the money, then you will not be given more money to waste in the future. And you see organizations creating last-minute activities that have zero impact on the ground, and absolutely exaggerating the outcomes of their activities so it can look appealing enough for them to get the next rounds of funding. This becomes a very vicious cycle, a cycle that you have demonstrated is hindering our development in so many estates, because it's kind of like taking us away from looking into our own potentials and our own resources. And as an activist in Togo, I have been an activist in Togo for over 10 years. And the interesting thing was that the only time that my organization was given foreign donor fund, we had to return the money. We received the funding in July 2018. By July 2019, we still didn't know how to use it based on their criteria, because there were so many restrictions with what they expected us to do with the funding. Our organization's goal is to end dictatorship in Togo, but then they are telling us, your job shouldn't be about, you shouldn't be openly demanding the end of dictatorship in Togo, because that will look like you're trying to bring down a government. So you shouldn't use those, you shouldn't do A, B, C, D. Then we kept thinking about ways, and everything we come up with, you're like, it doesn't align with what we are doing. And there is no way an organization like ours, which is known for what it does, can go back to people and tell them you shouldn't be using this language. That's the only language we are promoting. So after going back and forth with them, we were given another extension for 1 year. After that second year, July 2020, we had to say we're sorry, but we don't know how to use the money because it doesn't align with what you're doing. And we have been doing great things for so many years without that money. So I think we'll just focus on our small resources and do what we continue to do, because we feel like doing the job the way you want us to do it is going to harm us more than what we want, because We don't want people to now see us as a diluted organization that is no longer talking about democratic change, that is no longer demanding adamantly that the regime must go, but now an organization that is saying we just want reforms and we want ABC. So we don't want to lose that radicalism that has attracted you to us in the first place and return the money. But that was a trigger moment for me. And I'm like, I believe that if the 0.8% of 2% of the money that we receive is the money that is used in NGOs, like you said, Degan, and many organizations, grassroots organizations, are doing fantastic things on the ground. During the COVID crisis, I have seen communities rise amazingly to support populations on the ground. I have seen the Togolese communities, the diaspora in the US alone raising $98,000, the one in Europe raising over $60,000. And this is Togo is one of the smallest countries in the region, and that's a lot of money for our communities. So in reality, you do have Africans raising money enormously to support their communities, to do humanitarian work, to do how do you call it, democracy and human rights work, and they are tapping into their own resources without necessarily expecting any donor fund. But the question is, we are not seeing that effort being given as much attention, and we have the impression that without the donors, there is nothing happening on the ground. Well, there's so much happening on the ground, and what the amount that the donors are accounting for the work on the ground is not even up to 10% of the amount that people are allocating at their own level to build their communities. So I'll ask this question to Jimm. Can you please share with us some of the methods of fundraising on the ground that are used in Africa, but that are not written about, that are not talked about, so people can understand that Africans are not just opening their arms and waiting for donor money. There are many Africans, many African organizations and CSOs, and whether they are formal or informal, that are actually doing humanitarian work by mobilizing resources exclusively on the ground.
Thank you very much, Farida. That's really a very pertinent question, and I was really about coming to chip in that regard. Particularly, I was quite amazed, by the effort of Somali organizations to pull together resources to carry out this research. And when Degan shared that, it actually struck me, because in the midst of COVID in Ghana, while the government was really working assiduously to respond to the challenges of COVID, in the country, civil society organizations found that they've been left alone. Maybe they were talking independently to their donors on how to respond, but the response was slow. And what happened, which was quite amazing, was that the civil society platform on the Sustainable Development Goals stood on their feet and took upon the opportunity to mobilize their members. That is where it began from. The members of the network, how can we respond at this critical time to the needs of the vulnerable populations in the cities where we had the lockdowns? And we are talking about Kumasi and Accra. And so when the platform brought together its members, they discussed, first of all, they set up a committee. And the committee, they were working on a pro bono basis, basically to share ideas, to share narratives and strategies on what to do, what the problem is, how to raise the resources needed, and how to distribute these resources. And within a span of 1 month, about $20,000 was raised. In Ghana cedis, we are looking at about 114,000 Ghana cedis, which is higher than 20,000 Ghana cedis. But the thing here is that amount of money gave the platform and its members the leverage to go out to the vulnerable groups, decide on the beneficiaries, know what they wanted, and how to reach out to them to give to them what they wanted. And so there are issues about means of mobilizing resources, contacting your members, doing crowdfunding. Campaigns were put out and people were donating via mobile money. People were donating via bank transfers. to the accounts that were provided. And again, there are other means, like the social enterprise models, but maybe before I even highlight on the social enterprise models that organizations can use and are using, WASCI, in collaboration with Innovation for Change, has put together 12 alternative funding models that organizations can use, and these were actually models that were described by African organizations on how we can generate resources from what we have, as opposed to waiting for external support. So there is crowdfunding, raising campaigns online, getting people to support. And in many of our countries, there is the advent of the use of mobile money. We can use that to easily get from $1 to 50 cents to $1,000, and Africans are giving. At least in Ghana, where we work, Ghanaians are giving. We've seen Degan has shared the case of Somalia. Somalis are giving, and we are willing to give. We just need to put out this clear-cut means of giving and to enable our constituents to support the work that we are doing. Other alternative means that organizations can use is, to create business ventures through which they can raise resources, to support their work. And with that, in the midst of COVID, Safe Child Advocacy is one of the organizations that we've been supporting over a 3-year period now. And because, of the COVID pandemic, they went into the production of face masks. And while producing the face masks, the Food and Drugs Authority approved the face masks they were providing. They provided over 20,000 face masks. They distributed 10,000 for free, and they sold the other 10,000 face masks. And because other civil society organizations got to know that Safe Child Advocacy is producing approved face masks, they contacted them to buy face masks worth $2,000, approximately $2,000. So what are those competencies that we have that we can use them to generate income? There are also approaches like asset building. Many of us in our organizations have office space that is quite spacious, and we can use it to do several things. We can let them out, for conferences, for other partners to come and use them to organize conferences, meetings, and we get a small fee from that can help us to operate, to fuel our generators, to buy data for our offices, to equip, the office based on what we need. So there are these different approaches that organizations can use, and it's very important for us to try them out. And like I initially mentioned in the introductory remark, that we've been working on the Change the Game Academy program, and it's been interesting the growth trajectory that we are observing in terms of those organizations that are participating in this program. In Ghana, between 2018 and 2019, we trained over 20 organizations, and out of this, we went out to collect the stories of how they have been raising resources, and we found out that some of them are using crowdfunding, some of them are sending out targeted letters to high net worth individuals in their who come from their communities or who are in the country and that can support their work. Some of them are approaching businesses in the countries, and if they are Urban Poor Child Organization, for example, they wanted to renovate, an education center. So they approached a company that provides paint, and that is what they used to paint the building. And so there are all of these tactics. Based on how we identify our resources, we can define who is best placed to provide the resources. It could be financial, it could be material, it could be in terms of time, And so once we are able to lay out or lay down all the needs we have, we can know whom to approach to get what we want to do, what we can do. And it's really high time that as African civil society, we should believe in the potential that we have. We should believe in the resources we have. All we need to do is to understand all these tactics, and we should not be afraid to ask from our own, because more and more we are seeing that many more Africans are willing to give, and it's just whom to give to that sometimes they don't know, and they will keep what they have to give to themselves until they find the right persons or institutions to give to. And if African civil society can be bold enough to make those asks they need, of course, they will get the resources they want. Thank you.
thank you very much.
Add something to that, Farida?
Yes, before I get to you, I just want to let our participants know that they can ask their questions, leave their questions in the Q&A, and then we will be happy to share those questions with you, the panelists. You can go ahead, Degan.
Yeah, I just wanted to give an example that I learned about, I don't know, like 5 years ago that really surprised me. I was at KCDF, the Kenyan Community Development Foundation, at their conference. I think they were celebrating, I don't know, 20 years or something. Anyways, and then I met a South African NGO, and this lady told me this amazing story. So when apartheid ended, they were running a bunch of health and education and schools in Soweto. And apartheid ended, and they've lost all their funding overnight. The EU was one of their biggest funders, the European Union. And so they sat around the table, the board members of this NGO, and they said, what should we do? Should we close down our doors, or should we do something different? And they all decided to stay in business, and they decided to all contribute money out of their pocket. And that initial amount of money is what they started investing in. And as a result of that first initial investment, they are now a multi-million-dollar multinational corporation. And they run all of their health facilities and their schools, all of this from this money, to the point where the reason I met her is that this company, this private holding company that they established from that initial investment, has saturated the market, she said, in South Africa in terms of investment opportunities. And now they're coming into the Kenya and Nigeria market to see if they can do investments there. They're acting like a proper investment firm and looking for commercial, real estate, other things that they can invest in. So to me, that was like, that's when the light went on in my head. And I was like, wow, so this is possible. And it's extremely possible, but we just need to open our minds to the possibilities and have the courage to take those kinds of risks and do that kind of work.
Thank you very much for that example, which illustrates the ability for African organizations to actually innovate and invest and break away from the dependency cycle. But I do have a question, however. I believe that there is a tremendous amount of money and resources, both in time, monetary resources, financial, as well as human resources, properties that are invested in African humanitarianism by Africans. At every community level, you have people who are supporting children going to school. You have people who are organizing to support the widows, for example, or to help in terms of responding to crises and humanitarian crises and emergencies. But I feel like there is not enough documentation. And all of these are hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, that are being invested in building communities, but that are not accounted for. How do we document in a better way African humanitarianism? That's a question for you, Degan.
That's a big question. So I'll just tell you in Somalia what we try to do. By the way, there's a lot of money in the global South, and there's a lot of money in Africa. And to the point where we are seeing this very insidious phenomena that has happened in the past 5 years, where because of the growth and the middle income and the high net worth individuals and the private sector the growth in many countries in the global South, especially in Asia, a lot of INGOs have nationalized. So they go to India and they create a national board and a national CEO, and they claim to be a national civil society organization for the purpose of fundraising in that country, nothing else. So the money that Tata in India would have given to a 50, 40-year-old civil society organization that has existed in India, that now they're competing against this massive fundraising machinery that this INGO in India has from London, US, wherever, this brand that they have, and they're competing against these machinery that's very sophisticated, that's well-resourced, and it's almost a non-competition. So how is it that you as a local organization can do a premium ad in the newspaper or a premium advertisement on TV? They can afford to do that. They can make an investment and turn their $100,000 of marketing to $5 million in return on that investment. We don't have even that $100,000 to do these sophisticated marketing. So, and then we also have another problem where we're seeing, and by the way, that phenomena in Asia is now coming into Africa. We're seeing INGOs like World Vision coming into Zambia and saying, we want local philanthropy in Zambia, tell us and teach us. They had the nerve to go to the Zambian Community Foundation to ask Zambian Community Foundation to teach them. And I mean, it's shocking, the gall that they have. And so but this is happening, and it's going to go more and more. It's going to come to Kenya. It's going to go to Ghana. It's going to go to the middle income, rising, emerging markets, as the World Bank likes to call these countries. And so we have that threat. The other problem we have is that sometimes these global South private sector companies and high net worth individuals believe that it's better for them to be associated with a global North brand. So to be associated with a Save the Children brand makes you an international corporation like Tata. To be associated with a UNICEF brand, So we have to make sure as Africans that we actually capture and educate and raise the awareness of our high net worth individuals and our foundations like Dangote and Mo Ibrahim and others, and make sure that they don't get themselves as well co-opted into believing that international brand is a better brand than working with you, Farida, in Togo, than working with you, Jimm, at WASCI. This is a big thing that we need to do now, or even yesterday, because they're coming, and they're going to come in a big way into our countries. So, yeah, the last point I wanted to say, sorry, is in answer to your specific question, what can we do to document this? One of the things that's a problem, well, it's a problem, but it's also not a problem, is that our giving is so informal. Our giving happens through family, through our networks, through, all of these things. And what we're seeing is that the more educated, middle income, professionalized groups saying we want it more formalized. So in Somalia, what we're trying to do is create a national fund that will become more accountable, that will become more transparent for this giving. And that money, so it's a pot of money that we're trying to create that will be well audited, that will give all the accountability that these professionalized middle class want, but the money will be able to go to the smallest CBO in Somalia, not just the big professionalized NGOs. And so this is how we're trying to organize the giving that's taking place in an informal, haphazard, disorganized way. And maybe by pulling it all together, we can also make sure that there's efficiencies created, that we're not giving to the same school, that we're not giving to the same health facility, and so on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Degan. Thank you very much. That was very insightful. I do have a question from a participant, and I think this question goes more to you than to Jimm. The question is, first of all, thank you for such an amazing discussion. Speaking as a co-opted INGO staff who works every day to fight the system from within and failing miserably, I wanted to ask this question. Is asking for funds from our own and continuing the same system of capitalistic business models we create as aid sector the right way to go? So that's to you, Degan.
Maybe, I don't know, Farida, with your permission, maybe while Degan is putting her thoughts together, I can share some ideas on how we can document. Is that okay with you, Farida, Degan?
Please, Jimm.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Just to build on what Degan shared, there are several ways that we can, capture, make sure that what we are doing in terms of giving back to our society is well documented, be it formal or informal ways of giving. How do we make sure that we have a repository of knowledge that we can fall back onto years to come to know that this is what has happened in the past and this is what we can learn from? First of all, we can, amongst ourselves as civil society actors, we can collaborate. There are organizations within the sector that are stronger in the area of research, and we can collaborate with them so that while we are implementing or raising funds or raising resources locally, their role in that process is basically to make sure that the process is well documented and well disseminated for others to learn from. Also, civil society, the media is part of us. How can we equally make sure that we rope them into our actions and have these win-win partnerships wherein they can tap information from the work that we do, share those stories out there, invite others to give to the process. But the key thing is through documentaries, through news reports, we can have this repository of knowledge that we can look or fall back onto in the future. We also have the academia. There are PhD students, there are master students who can be actually very good. They are interested in working on areas around sustainability of civil society in our continents. They are interested in, giving, domestic giving, or even the sustainable development goals. How can we collaborate with the academia to ensure that these seasoned writers or researchers work with us in tandem in such a way that while we are interested or moving forward with our activities approach, raising the funds practically, they are coming on board with the skills to document. And also it is important that if we are collaborating with them, we should equally learn those skills so that with time, we can do it. And, with what we are doing in WASCI, over the past 3 years, we have been very dedicated to documenting how the giving landscape is in Ghana. And it's very interesting that an organization that was able to raise 10,000 Ghana cedis, that's about $1,700 between 2018 and 2019, we now know through the work we are doing to document that within this year alone, they've been able to raise as high as 80,000 Ghana cedis. That is about $3,500. And the tactics, the techniques they are using as pieces of information we will be putting out on our website and other organizations can learn from. So these are some of the approaches that we as formal or informal civil society actors, we can use to make sure that we document whatever we do, because it will be very important for the future generations to know where we are coming from in terms of our giving behavior on the continent. Thank you.
Jimm, thank you very much for sharing these strategies with us on how to document humanitarian efforts on the continent. I really appreciate it. Degan, I will repeat your question to you. Not that you forgot, but I'll repeat it to you just to kind of like bring us all on the same page. And then add a second one because it is as well to you. So the first question is, should we is asking for funds from our own and continuing the same system of capitalistic business models we create as an aid sector the right way to go? And the question is, first of all, the person is congratulating you for hitting the nail on the head as always. But then they are asking, can you please share the details of the Soweto Investment Fund, because the idea sounds really cool. If you have any idea, if you can share the website or any information you can use to look them up. Thank you.
So the first question about, I'm assuming when he or she calls themselves a co-opted INGO staff, I'm assuming they're an African. Okay, first of all, people have been giving since the beginning of time. Charity is an intrinsic part of human nature, yeah? So I don't know why it's now labeled as being capitalistic. Yeah, I'm not understanding that. You know, so what are we supposed to be? Communism is the next thing. Like it's supposed to be every egalitarian and nobody gives anything. Even in a communist society, a neighbor who has a little bit more will give to the next neighbor who has less that day. It's part of human nature. Even in communist societies, they still give. So what I'm saying is that we need to tap into that and be prepared. First of all, we need to realize the world is what it is. Yeah, we're not going to change the behavior of the UN and the INGOs overnight. They're going to come to our countries and start extracting these resources for themselves. So what I'm saying is, let's be awake to what's going to happen and let's organize ourselves and put in the infrastructure to support our grassroots civil society organizations and really just kind of ensure that we create the barriers and so that they don't come and thrive in our markets. That's the reality. They're going to come. So that's what I'm saying. Let's be aware and let's prevent it and let's develop our own brands. Let's make the WASCI brand as credible, as excellent as everything, as UNICEF in Ghana to the private sector. There's no reason why all the private sector should not be coming to WASCI to give resources to, instead of coming to Save the Children. So we have to work on that and support the institutions like the WASCIs and others and make sure that they are able to get that kind of brand recognition and that marketing, because ultimately it's all about marketing, and marketing requires resources. And oftentimes CSOs don't have that resources, don't have that money. It's usually unrestricted money. The money that they collect in India is what they're coming to Zambia with to do the marketing with, you know? So that's the reality. So I'm sorry to say, I disagree with that. I really don't think it's capitalistic to be doing charitable giving. The other question about, my question is, what is next? First of all, I can't remember right now off the top of my head, but what I will do is I will try to find that organization and I will have Mukami email it to all of you. But I can't remember, but I think what is next is, I think if I could go back and speak to Degan 20 years ago, what would I tell her? I would say, save every single penny that you have, even it's $5,000, $10,000, invest it. Buy a piece of land, do whatever you can to become financially independent, because there's nothing more empowering than being your own boss and pulling your own strings instead of having an INGO or UN agency pulling your strings. The freedom that it gives you to have your own resources and not to worry about paying salaries of your staff, keeping the lights on, paying the rent, the freedom you have to speak powerfully and refuse bad money is a freedom that you cannot take for granted. You really can't. And if we really don't want to be beholden to the piper that keeps paying our bills, then we really need to figure out how we become financially sovereign. And to me, that should be the priority of every single director, of every single CSO.
Degan, thank you so much for this. I would like to thank you both, you, Degan, and Jimmy. Unfortunately, we are out of time. This conversation is so paramount that I feel like 1 hour just passed by so quickly, and I wish we had more time. But of course, it will take days of seminar just to discuss this issue. But I'm glad to have heard from you. The information that you have shared are extremely eye-opening, and it can help us in many ways in the work that we are doing at each CSO level. We are continuing to challenge our colleagues who are also working in civil society in Africa to look for innovative ways for us to break away from the independence, like Degan said, and rely more on local resources like Jimm has recommended. So I would like to thank you all so much. Unfortunately, because we are over time, I wouldn't be able to go back to my speakers and ask them for their final words, but I believe that all that we have gotten from you is enriching enough for our panelists, our participants, I'm sorry, and I want to thank them so much for joining us today and sharing this moment of knowledge. So I would like to thank the Carico team, most particularly Mukami for doing all the background work for us to be able to host this event today. And also I would like to thank Selena, who works with Degan, for also giving us this platform for us to be able to meet and helping us behind the scenes. Thank you so much, and I really look forward for an opportunity to speak with you again and to have a chance to exchange on great topics like this one. You have a good day. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.